I'm Terry Shepard. Being a confident podcast guest is a skill that can be learned. And that's why I wrote How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. It's a sweet and short primer that teaches you about the gear, the appearance, and the messaging that can grab and hold today's micro attention spans and motivate your listeners to take action. How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. The digital version is just $1.99 at Amazon. Grab your copy today and sell more books tomorrow.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
In the wake of heartbreak, some of us retreat, some of us rebuild, and some of us make a plan. For Corey Seemiller, a 40-something lesbian determined not to drown in loneliness, that plan became a mission. Days after a viral video of her ex with a new love flooded her feed, Corey armed herself with a meticulously detailed checklist for healing and reinvention. What follows is the Soulmate Strategy, my imperfect plan to conquer heartbreak and find true love. A candid, funny, and deeply vulnerable memoir about the illusion of control in matters of the heart. From psychic readings to breakup coaching to unexpected lessons from Eminem, Corey chronicles her search for love and finds that sometimes the real one we are looking for is the person we become along the way. Corey Seemiller, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here.
Your book is filled with emotion, authenticity, discomfort, humor. Why'd you write it?
It's funny. When I went through my breakup, I was at the bottom, the worst I had ever felt. And I started looking for anything and everything I could read, all about what am I supposed to do now? How do I get out of this? And there wasn't really a lot there that sort of felt like it resonated with my story. And so I started just journaling, chronicling something. I thought I'd make a funny magazine article about all my kind of hot mess dating adventures. And then I put it out there for the world and maybe they would get entertained by it, but also at the same time, maybe find some inspiration or guidance around it. And so it ended up that I created the book that I wanted to read, the one that I thought would help me, that talks all about how messy this is. It's messy. We are at our lowest. We are hurting. And many of us just grab onto anything that we can to feel better. And I was doing that. So I thought, hey, why shouldn't I let the world know I was doing that so they don't feel so alone when they do it too?
You described this as an imperfect plan to find true love. What did imperfection teach you that perfection never could?
Oh, perfection is... I used to think perfection was an achievable goal. It is so far not an achievable goal. As a matter of fact, imperfection served me better because then I knew I could let go of things that didn't work. I could stop forcing and pushing because I wanted something to come about that just wasn't meant to come about. And I feel like it took me a long time. It took me the entire journey of this story to basically say, the imperfection is what taught me the most, because had I achieved all the things I set out to do, I don't think I would have healed the way that I did. It was the act of trying, maybe failing, trying and pushing, and it not turning out the way I wanted that taught me so much about resilience and about coming back into my own self that perfection never would have taught me.
The book also touches on the intersection of control and vulnerability. Why do you think these two qualities clash so often in relationships?
For me, one of the things that really resonated about my story that I didn't really get until after I had gone through the journey was this concept of fear of failure, right? This idea of if I failed in another relationship, I somehow am a failure, that I can't make something work. And so by being vulnerable and talking about, here's a failure, and then turning around and looking at it and saying, it's not a failure to leave something that isn't a fit for you or doesn't make you happy. It's actually part of growth. It's part of becoming who you are. It's becoming content and happy and joyful. And so the idea of being vulnerable about that quest for perfection and achievement, and then what I thought was failure was really actually achieving what I wanted, which was the growth and the fulfillment that I was seeking all along.
How did that light flip on in your mind?
It was through a lot of therapy. That was one thing. It was interesting because I started to look at other areas of my life and realized in those times and those spaces in which I pushed and I forced things that didn't feel like they were right, they never really turned out right. And I was willing to accept that in my professional life. I was willing to accept that in my personal life, in my social life, in every aspect except my romantic life. For whatever reason, I thought that if I just pushed and pushed, that I would be successful there. And of all things to know that you don't have control of, love is probably the most elusive, right? You can force and push your way into a job and do a project that maybe isn't the perfect fit and still survive. But forcing love, that just seemed antithetical to everything. And so once I stepped back and I looked at other areas of my life where forcing and pushing didn't work, I started to realize, hey, wait a minute, maybe it's not working in love either.
Where did that paradigm of forcing working come from?
I don't know if I was born this way, but I'm definitely a type A personality. I'm a Virgo. I am everything on every single personal assessment you could take that's all about being checklist, analytical, get it done. So even as a little kid, I had my to-do list. I'm like 3 years old, 5 years old. I have all of this stuff organized. And so I think part of it came from just my own, I don't know, maybe it was genetics or upbringing, but it seemed easier to navigate life when you had control over things. And the more control I got, the more control I wanted. So if I could control my schedule, then I wanted to fit more things in my schedule, and then I needed to control it even more. And so I just basically reinforced it my whole life and come into midlife adulthood and realizing that's really the only way I know how to live. And even like I said, when I learned in my professional world and in my other aspects of my personal world that pushing and forcing didn't work, I still started every single one of those with pushing and forcing. And then I realized it doesn't work and I step back. And then the next time something comes about, I push and force again. So it's definitely a habitual process. But now I'm realizing to let that go and being very conscious about not pushing or forcing at the onset for anything that I do anymore. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot to hold that restraint, but I'm doing pretty well at it.
Corey Seemiller is our special guest. We're talking about the Soulmate Strategy, my imperfect plan to conquer heartbreak and find true love. The book is often funny and definitely self-aware. How did humor help you process heartbreak?
Well, there's two parts of the humor. One is writing about it. Like I literally read back and I'm laughing at myself. But the first part of it is that some of it was humorous when I was experiencing it. So it was like, okay, this process isn't all that bad. Like how many of these weird things can happen to people? Some of the bizarro dates, a lot of us who have done online dating and things have run into that. But I mean, I had to sometimes chuckle and say, really? Is this really happening? And that gave me a sense of not so much doom and gloom for the whole healing process, because right when I needed something funny to happen in my world, because I was feeling so down, something funny just happened. I would meet somebody funny, or I'd have a really bizarre interaction. And it was just a pick-me-up and say, okay, I got to look at this with a sense of humor, because if I don't, I'm going to be wallowing on the floor in tears for months and months. And so it's been fun to dive back into the book from the editing process, because recording the audiobook and just doing even the written edits, I'm reading these stories and I'm laughing. I'm just laughing because I'm putting myself right back into these situations thinking, that is really funny. I cannot believe I endured that. But in the end, there were some sad moments, and there were also just some really funny, happy, joyful ones.
And you used a lot of different helpers on your team, coaches, psychics. What did Eminem teach you?
Eminem was probably one of my biggest guides in this whole process. It was funny because I've always liked rap and I've always liked Eminem. But for whatever reason, early on in the process, I would go out walking, and that was my happy place. And I would turn on Eminem because he had such a fast beat. And then I started to listen to the words, and his song Lose Yourself was so powerful to me. And I really just the words hit home for me. And I would be belting them out while I was walking. And I'm sure people with their dogs and walking by were thinking, who is this person? But at the same time, I was so enthralled in his work that I've downloaded almost every song that he's ever made. because I think that he's such an insightful lyricist, and he just spoke to me. And it wasn't necessarily that the words that he said matched my experience. It was that he was so vulnerable in the words that he would put out there about his own experience that allowed me to feel empowered to be vulnerable about mine. And that's what I really loved about him. And I also like the beat, right? He's great to walk to. So Eminem was definitely my guide through this whole journey.
And the psychics?
The psychics, if it weren't for the psychics, I probably wouldn't have a story. But they got me on a path that was challenging, introspective, and sometimes derailing at times. I think the psychic thing for me, though, was that I really wanted to seek clarity and I wanted to seek certainty. And it's funny because, so much of love and life is just not certain. And when I was getting to a point where I just was so uncertain about what was going to happen with my love life, the only people I thought I could reach out to were psychics and intuitives. They will know for sure what my fate is. And as long as I knew what it was, even if it was bad, even if it was no, you're never going to love again, at least I would know. But I went and sought them out, and I started to get all sorts of things, off the wall things. And then I started to respond in ways that were taking my free will right out the window and leaning into all these prophecies, some of them conflicting. And I was really all over the place. But I think in the end, what I really liked about the psychics and their kind of intervention was that it really challenged me to think about trusting my own intuition and what felt right. And that, even if the psychics were giving me some kind of true or accurate message at the time, I still have the free will to decide how I'm going about it. And when things didn't feel right and I still kept forging towards the psychic prophecies, that's not something that was helpful to me. And so I realize now that I really have to trust my own self, that I have enough of my own inner wisdom to guide myself, and that it's okay to have uncertainty. And not even just okay, it's good. It's exciting to have uncertainty, because if I could plan love, which I was trying to do, it's not the answer to actually finding the love you want.
We're talking about the Soulmate Strategy, my imperfect plan to conquer heartbreak and find true love. And we're talking with its author, Corey Seemiller. My wife and I, as I was preparing for our conversation today, were making a list of our favorite couples, and we find that many of them are same-sex couples, which is a delight to me.
Yes.
How important was it for you to bring visibility and authenticity to LGBTQ relationships?
It was huge. It was at the forefront of really what I was thinking when I was writing this book. As I had said before, this was the book that I really needed when I was going through heartbreak, because I was in a same-sex relationship. We had split up. It was heartbreaking and devastating. But I would go to the bookstore, and every book I found was about heterosexual divorce. And while I can read that, and while there's really important and interesting information in there that is helpful, it was not exactly what I was experiencing. And so I couldn't find anything that would really just make me feel so not alone. And you also have to think about, who can you talk to when you feel alone? And there's some people that are in same-sex relationships and they're still hidden, or they're not out, and they break up and they have no one to talk to. They can't confide in their therapist, or they can't confide in their friends because they don't want to disclose their own sexual orientation. And that still happens today, so sadly. And so I wanted to have a book, like a space where people could enter into and say, my relationship was valid and real, and my heartbreak is valid and real. And I want a place that I can feel like I'm not alone. And that's exactly what I tried to write. And I also wanted to make sure that it highlighted all of the things, the sadness and the despair, but the hilarity and the kind of absurdness at some points, because that's what that experience is like. And so while heartbreak is universal, there is a nuance with same-sex relationships. And so I really hope that this is where people can find some sense of comfort and solace and familiarity.
Defining what love means is an intensely personal journey, no matter what your gender preference is. When did you become aware of your sexuality?
Truthfully, 8th grade, I had a crush. I had a crush on someone on my 8th grade basketball team. But at the time, obviously, I didn't know what that was. I just wanted to practice shooting free throws with her all the time. Later on, though, I grew into it was more of an understanding that I wasn't necessarily attracted to girls, but I wasn't attracted to boys. And I just thought maybe I was just a really busy, like I said, overprogrammed Virgo type A kid. Once I got to college, though, I ended up meeting somebody, and I write about it in the book about my first experience, because that really set the tone for how I saw love, romantic love, because I didn't know it could feel the way that it did until I was with the gender that I felt like I was attracted to. And so since that point, though, I've been pretty certain that I'm a lesbian, and I had a little stint where I dated guys for a little bit in there, but that wasn't my thing. Very nice, very patient men, but so for most of my life, I've been with women. And so for me, it's a very clear identity, and it's not just clear to me, but I'm also very out and let people know my identity. But I understand we live in a world in which there are many people who don't live like that, or are just discovering their identities in terms of their sexual orientation. And again, being in this space was really important for me so that I could at least be there, even if it's just as an author or the character in this book, so that people felt like, hey, listen, I'm not alone.
I found a lot of advice in the Soulmate Strategy to be universal that didn't necessarily require you to be LGBTQ to benefit from it. What do you think some of those universal tips are?
It was interesting. When I was writing this book, I was trying to create this checklist of all these tips, right? These ideas, these strategies you could use to get over heartbreak and find love. And yeah, like you said, any of them could be used by anyone, which is really great. But it was funny because the tips usually weren't things that I heard and were suggested to me, like, hey, you should try this. And then I tried it, and then it helped me with heartbreak. It was some haphazard thing that I stumbled across. I did it, and then I evaluated, did it work? Did it not work? And so my list was a little all over the place. But once I organized it into the list, it's 44 items of tips, it really actually made a lot of sense. And so even though they organically came about in the process of my journey, they were incredibly helpful in retrospect. So some of the things that I saw that I found were most helpful to me were things around mindset shifting. I really embraced the law of attraction and manifesting. I've always been a realist and very pragmatic. And I realized that as soon as I started embracing this positive mindset, this putting good energy and positive energy out to the world, I was starting to get it back. And for me, that felt really good and felt really affirming. And that's something that I still do today. I'm definitely more of a glass half full person. It's not just helped me in my romantic endeavors, but it's definitely been something that's helped me professionally and in my other areas of my personal life. So mindset shifting was huge. I'm, of course, always going to recommend that you download Eminem onto your streaming devices, because Eminem is a very wise man. So I would definitely recommend that. The other thing that I think was really helpful for me was well-being, my physical well-being. I made it a point to walk every single day. And I've been doing it now for almost 6 years. I've never missed a day where I haven't walked at least usually about 2 miles, but most of the time I walk anywhere from 4 to 6. And during the course of this journey, that walking really helped me reset myself. I walked outside in nature, often with the sun shining on me. I would listen to Eminem. I'd talk on the phone to people that I wanted to catch up with. I would listen to podcasts. However, I felt like I needed to use that time. Sometimes I would walk in silence, not a lot because I'm an extrovert. But I found that space was physically good for me. It was mentally good for me, and emotionally and even spiritually good for me. As a tip, I think finding what that place is to be in terms of your well-being is important. And for some people, it's meditation, it's journaling, it's playing basketball. But that to me was really important. So I think it was really this mental mind shift and this kind of physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being that really came together to be the most profound in terms of helpfulness in my healing journey.
What's been the response from your advanced readers?
There's 2 words that have come up from almost everybody who has given a blurb is raw and messy. And not the writing, I'm thinking, but really just this idea that I just lay it out there. Like I'm a character in the book. I'm obviously the main character. And there are points in which my advanced readers have said they have been yelling at the book. No, Corey, do not say that. Do not do that. And they're yelling at the book. And then guess what they say? Oh, I can't believe you did that. And so I said, that's exactly how I wanted you to feel. I wanted you to feel like you were in it with me. And that's really what has summoned from it. I think it's fun. I've had, obviously, the characters or the people in the book, most of them have already read it in many iterations. But I've had some friends who were not part of this journey, were not a character, and have just read the book recently. And they know enough about me to also scream at the book and say, no, even though I know you, what are you doing? Do not. Oh, you did. But I really like that feedback because, again, if you're not yelling at the book, you're not engaged in the book. I mean, in my mind, at least with my topic in my book and the decisions I'm making in my memoir, is I want people to feel like they are right there with me. And that's the feedback that I've been getting.
What does happily ever after mean to you now?
At first, it was about achieving everything on my list, whatever that was, whether that was healing or my professional goals. I really think that happily ever after for me means peace. Just feeling a sense of peace. And I think that peace for me comes in the form of fulfillment in what I'm doing, a sense of purpose, connections that feel strong and healthy, and self-love. And that is also absent of things like major conflict and drama. Of course, we're going to have those kinds of things every once in a while, but the idea that there's just peace, like you can look outside and you can just breathe and not have 1,000 things on your mind. And I know it's hard in this day and age to clear our minds and do those things, but being able to get to that place where I can just savor the moment in the present has been really fulfilling.
How do you define your purpose these days?
I think particularly after writing this book, although it's always been a purpose of mine, is to help others, help them by teaching them. I'm a professor, I'm a teacher by nature, and I've always been all about trying to help people reach their potential, right? Mostly their intellectual potential in the field that I work in. But it's really expanded to helping people reach their emotional potential and their mental and even physical potential. I do a lot of physical things where I'm out doing half marathons and all sorts of stuff and bringing people along. And I organize hikes for people who might not be able to hike very fast, but want to get to the top of a mountain. And I stay with them until they get to the top. And so for me, it's just being a part of other people's journeys so I can help them be who they want to be, the best versions of themselves. And so for me, that feels like that's my purpose. And that may show up in a work setting. It may show up in a personal setting. But the idea is that I'm somehow that guide for other people.
If you had to start all over with this project, how would you do it differently?
I always say if I were to do it differently, there's a whole bunch of things I wouldn't have done, but then I wouldn't have a book and I wouldn't be where I am today. But I think if I were to do it over again, memoir writing is difficult because it involves real people. And for me, that's been a blessing and a challenge because you're not just telling your story, but your story has other people's stories in it. And I think for me, having never done that before, I wasn't sure how to best capture that with the integrity that those stories need to be told, with the consent that they need to be told. And if I would have known what I know now, I probably would have written the story, maybe not differently, but I would have embraced the relationships with the characters in the story in a way that was just more informed about what does it mean to tell other people's stories. And that was a huge learning curve for me. I have a lot of support from the people that are in the book, but there were some folks that it was tricky in trying to tell the story in a way that they felt authentic and empowered. And that hurts my heart a little bit because I wanted to make sure that I painted people in as positive of a light as I could. But that would be the part that I really wish that I might have known more when I started, so I could have maybe more gently entered into that process.
It's an impossible task.
Right?
It really is.
I'm in a memoir group online, and it's like everybody posts the same thing. What do you do? And like the next door neighbor gets really mad that you said that they yelled over the fence for something, and you're like, I don't know how to say it differently. You did yell over the fence. That's the hard part about memoir, and it really is. And it's hard because I don't want to hurt anyone in the process of writing a memoir. And I don't think I do. This memoir is really uplifting in many ways. And I really believe that the people who are portrayed in it are portrayed in great light. But at the same time, it's a difficult task. And memoir writing is a really special craft. And I just had no idea how to do it. And I've been learning by doing.
The book is The Soulmate Strategy, My Imperfect Plan to Conquer Heartbreak and Find True Love, by our special guest, its author, Corey Seemiller. Corey, this has been wonderful. Thanks for the conversation.
Thanks so much, Terry. It's been a pleasure.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.